I was always seen as the disappointing daughter while my sister was the golden child. The truth about her came to light at my wedding. I've had a successful career as a research professor at a well-known institution, but I've always been the disappointing daughter in my family. I had to tell my story now after decades of I was always seen as the disappointing daughter, while my sister was the golden child. The truth about her came to light at my wedding. I've had a successful career as a research professor at a well-known institution, but I've always been the disappointing daughter in my family. I had to speak up now after decades of silence. Since we were small, my younger sister Ava, 38 degrees Fahrenheit, has been the golden child, and their obvious partiality has finally reached a breaking point, shattering our entire family dynamic. The faint sting of comparison permeates my earliest recollections. When I was 8 years old, I recall sitting in my room, excitedly ever since I was a kid. My sister Ava has always been the favorite. It got to the point where we couldn't stand each other. I remember being 8 and reading my science books in my room, and hearing my mom downstairs say, "Why can't you be more gregarious like your sister?" At 6, Eva had already got our parents' attention by entertaining their friends in the living room with her theatrical acts. I used to spend hours taking old clocks apart and putting them back together again. I was interested in how things worked while Eva was performing and getting all the attention. It was an early pattern that I asked for a chemistry set for my 10th birthday, but instead I got some used novels because books are more practical. 2 months later, Eva said she wanted to take dance lessons, and our parents, so out of the blue there was money for private lessons, complete with new ballet shoes and specially designed tutus. That same year, when I asked to join the school science club, my mom groaned about the cost and told me to focus on making friends instead. In those early years, my only family ally was my grandma Martha, her home, which it was only a few blocks away, and it turned into my haven. I would spend weekends with Grandma Martha, while my parents took Ava to acting classes and dance performances. Before she retired, she taught science in high school, and she fostered my curiosity in a manner that my parents did not. "Your mind is a gift," she would say as she taught me about the constellations from her backyard or helped me with easy experiments in her kitchen when we were teenagers. The difference in how we were treated became really obvious. My renewable energy project won the state science fair when I was 14 years old. My parents said they had to take Ava to a really important audition, so I was the star of the show. And my parents didn't even go to the ceremony. They threw a huge party that year, inviting the whole extended family and even hiring a photographer. But they didn't really acknowledge my achievements at home. I was a high school star with a 4.0 GPA, but they didn't really recognize that. I was president of the scientific club and editor of the school newspaper, and Ava was starring in school plays and dating the football captain at the same time. Her social life and her theater endeavors were the topic of every dinner talk. If my academic achievements were recognized at all, they were just given a cursory nod. I had obtained a full scholarship to study biochemistry at a prominent university by the time my college acceptance letters arrived. When Ava decided she wanted to go to a pricey private performing arts college, our parents sold our holiday home to pay for her education. My mom's response was, "At least we won't have to worry about your tuition fees." They remarked, "Ava shows such promise. We can't let her talent go to waste." I pushed myself into my studies during my undergraduate years, finding comfort in the lab, where my intelligence and dedication were at last rewarded. I was really supported by my teachers. They were my mentors. I got a full scholarship to a really good PhD school after graduating with honors. Ava got a call back for a commercial audition, so my parents left early even though they were at my graduation. That I got a lot of research funding, published a lot, and at 40, I was granted tenure, which is pretty rare in academia. But at family get-togethers, the topic of Ava's acting career or her marriage to Richard, a successful real estate developer, always came up. My research in molecular biology led me to conclude that Emily was still doing her science. Then I met David, a fellow researcher in my department, and I felt like I had finally found bliss. He seemed to share my enthusiasm for. I was granted tenure, which is pretty rare in academia. But people always talked about Ava's acting career or her marriage to Richard, a rich real estate developer, at family get-togethers. After I finished my molecular biology research, I thought, Oh, Emily's still doing her science. When I met David, a researcher in my department, I felt like I'd finally found happiness. He seemed to like the same stuff as me, and we worked well together on a bunch of papers. I thought that when he proposed last year, I'd finally have a typical milestone that my family could recognize and celebrate. But things fell apart in the worst way last week. I stayed late at the lab to finish some data for our most recent paper. I found David and Ava. I found them sharing a passionate hug on his desk when I went to his office to deliver the results. My fiancé and my married sister were having an affair, which was even worse than the heartbreaking betrayal. What happened afterwards was even worse. Our parents were immediately worried about Ava when I told them. My mother begged me not to tell Richard, saying, "Think about your sister's marriage. He has a prenup. She'll lose everything if this gets out." My father agreed, saying, "These things happen. Emily, you need to be the bigger person here. That I've been the bigger person for 40 years. When they held lavish celebrations for Ava but missed my birthdays, I didn't say anything. They flew across the nation to attend Ava's community theater performances, but I didn't say anything when they missed my PhD defense. When they told me I needed to learn how to be financially independent but assisted Ava in purchasing her first home, I swallowed my hurt amidst all of this turmoil. You've got to be the bigger person here. I've been the bigger person for 40 years. When they held lavish celebrations for Ava, but missed my birthdays, I didn't say anything. They flew across the nation to attend Ava's community theater performances, but I didn't say anything when they missed my PhD defense. When they told me I needed to learn how to be financially independent, but assisted Ava in purchasing her first home, I swallowed my hurt. Then something unexpected happened. I met Michael at a university fundraising event 3 weeks ago. He was there to deliver the ideas for our new science facility. He's a 45-year-old architect who creates research facilities. When I discuss my work, Michael listens with true attention. Unlike David, who frequently engaged in intellectual competition with me, he poses intelligent queries and discusses his own imaginative technique for creating environments that support scientific research. Something unexpected happened. I met Michael at a university fundraising event 3 weeks ago. He was there to talk about the ideas for our new science facility. He's a 45-year-old architect who designs research facilities. When I talk about my work, Michael really listens. Unlike David, who often challenges me intellectually, he asks smart questions and talks about his own creative approach to designing environments that support scientific progress. When I called my grandmother Martha last week to tell her about Michael, she could tell something was different. She said, "You sound lighter, dear. Tell me about this architect of yours." We spent 2 hours chatting about everything, like how Michael's eyes light up when he talks about how art and science meet in his designs, how he asked me to comment on his early sketches for the new research wing, and how, when we met up for coffee, he remembered. I called my grandmother Martha last week to tell her about Michael, and she could tell something was off about my voice. She said, "You sound lighter, dear. Tell me about this architect of yours." We ended up talking for 2 hours and we covered everything, like how Michael's eyes light up when he talks about how art and science meet in his designs, how he asked me to comment on his early sketches for the new research wing, and how, when we got together for coffee, he remembered. There's a clear difference in how my family treated David and how they're dealing with Michael. Whenever I brought up David at family get-togethers, they'd instantly switch to Ava's latest achievements. But my parents really stopped praising Ava's acting career to listen when I mentioned Michael to my aunt during a recent family dinner. Of course, they could switch the topic to Ava. In a few minutes, they started chatting about an architect who's married to a friend of Ava's from yoga class. Ava: "Mom, I know it's a bit ironic, but I've been a professional for years and my parents barely notice." "Mom, you know, I'm mostly worried about whether you're getting enough light in the lab. You've published some really groundbreaking research that could lead to new treatments for genetic illnesses." Ava, on the other hand, has been doing little parts in community theater shows and commercials, and she has given the attention of an Oscar at every audition for my work on cellular regeneration. I was awarded the Morrison Grant last month in my field, which is a huge accomplishment because only 3 researchers are chosen nationwide. My mother said, "That's nice, dear. But did you hear about Ava's latest role?" When I called to tell genetic illnesses, Ava has been doing little parts, community theater shows and commercials. She's been so focused on the Oscar-worthy performances at every audition for my work on cellular regeneration. I was awarded the Morrison Grant last month in my field, which is a huge accomplishment because only 3 researchers are chosen nationwide. My mom said, "That's nice, dear. But did you hear about Ava's latest role?" When I called to tell her the news, she said she had 3 complete lines. They celebrated Ava landing the commercial part with a family supper later that week. My grant wasn't mentioned, in fact. I had visited David's office to show him the grant acceptance letter the day I saw him and Ava together, since we had collaborated on some of the initial research. I assumed he would be pleased, but I discovered him with my sister clutching the doorframe in disbelief as my engagement, the ring on my finger and her fancy dress caught everyone's attention. The next few days were a bit of a blur. David kept rambling on about how he felt neglected because I spent so much time in the lab. Eva casually mentioned, "Oh, Emily," as she adjusted her clothes. My parents called me a lot after I told them. They were all trying to save Eva's marriage and reputation. Nobody ever asked about how I was feeling. As usual, I went to. The ring on my finger and her fancy dress tied around her waist were the last things I remembered. After that, it was all a bit of a blur. David kept on going on about how he felt neglected because I spent so much time in the lab, and then Eva just said, "Oh, Emily," as she got dressed, and my parents started calling me all the time. They were all trying to save Eva's marriage and reputation, but no one ever asked how I was feeling. As usual, I went to my lab the next day. Science has always been my comfort zone. The one field where hard work and intelligence are more important than being flashy, and where the results matter more than showmanship. I was able to spend a few hours solving real problems with real answers, while my graduate students talked about their latest research. But something had changed inside me. For the first time in my life, I felt outraged instead of just hurt. I'm actually furious with my family's actions. It was a powerful, freeing wrath instead of the silent resentment I had harbored for years. I realized that I no longer needed their approval. After glancing at the grant letter on my desk, the papers I had published and the students eagerly awaiting my direction, I hadn't needed their approval for years. I had dinner with Michael that night. Since the fundraiser, we had been hanging out informally, but I had been reluctant to divulge too much about my family. I felt comfortable telling him everything because of his consistent presence and sincere interest in my opinions. His architect's eyes were focused as I explained 42 years of systematic dismissal and favorism, and he listened without interrupting. Michael didn't say much after I'd finished. Then he said something that made me see my problem in a new way. In architecture, we sometimes come across structures that look perfect on the outside but have major structural problems that can't be fixed with just a lick of paint. In these cases, the best thing to do is admit that the structure isn't safe and build a new one. I've tried being I'm the ideal daughter, the smart researcher, the understanding sister. I've downplayed my accomplishments to avoid overshadowing Ava, and to spare my parents the cognitive dissonance of having to acknowledge them, while maintaining their narrative of Ava as the special one. He's right. I've spent my entire life trying to fix a fundamentally flawed family structure. Grandma Martha, who is 92 years old and still as sharp as ever, always sees right through the dynamics of our family. Last night I had supper with her. "Your parents have spent so much time making Ava the star of their show that they've forgotten there are other stories worth telling too," she added, swirling her tea with a poise that belied her advanced age. "But you, my dear, have been writing your own story all along. Perhaps it's time to stop letting them edit it," she continued, taking my hand out. "I am writing this now because I have made up my mind. Michael and I we've been talking about getting married, not engaged yet, but heading that way. When the time comes, I won't have a big wedding or invite my parents or Ava, who'll probably try to make it about her. Instead, I'll have a small celebration with the people who've really supported me, including Grandma Martha, my Aunt Linda, my colleagues who appreciate my work, and Michael's family, who have shown me more sincere interest in 3 weeks than my own parents have in 42 years. I let Ava's attempt to call me go to voicemail yesterday, and she left a message saying that I'm overreacting to the situation with David and that she wanted to explain. She ended by reminding me that she is my only sister, and that families should forgive each other, which I deleted without answering. For the first time in my life, I'm putting my happiness ahead of my family's meticulously crafted story, choosing to be surrounded by people who appreciate me for who I am, not who they want me to be, and who celebrate my achievements without making them seem less to make someone else look good. Here's the thing. I'm a scientist and facts are facts. They broke up this family a long time ago, bit by bit, every time I'm a scientist, so I'm all about observable facts. And the facts are that my parents broke up this family long ago, bit by bit, every time they chose to devalue one daughter in order to elevate the other. I know there'll be fallout when my parents realize I'm serious about cutting contact. They'll probably tell everyone that I'm being dramatic, that I'm jealous of Ava's success, and that I'm destroying the family. I have my research, my students, my grants, and I decided to prioritize one daughter over the other. I know there'll be fallout when my parents realize I'm serious about cutting contact. They'll probably tell everyone that I'm being dramatic, that I'm jealous of Ava's success, and that I'm destroying the family. I have my research, my students, my grants, and now possibly a partner who sees me clearly and values what he sees. So here I am, 42, finally prepared to do the most important experiment of my life, seeing who I can be without the weight of their expectations and disappointments. Perhaps that's more than enough. Perhaps that's everything. First update. 3 months have passed since my previous post, and a lot has transpired. Let's start with the good news. Michael and I are officially engaged. He proposed last weekend while we were going over the final blueprints for the new research center. He had concealed the ring in a blueprint tube, and it was the ideal combination of thoughtful, subtle, and wholly US. Let me give you a little background so you can see how far I've come after the David and Ava disaster. I threw myself into the new research facility project, and working with Michael became my haven, as my family called me nonstop to ask me to forgive Ava and keep the peace. Michael and I spent long hours talking about how to create the ideal laboratory spaces. The interaction itself was a huge contrast to my experience with David, who made the proposal at a department meeting and made it all about getting attention from the public. With David, everything was a competition to see who had more publications, whose research was more innovative. Michelle, however, made it personal. My Aunt Linda, who was genuinely happy for us, told my parents the bad news, and soon after my phone was flooded with messages. "Why didn't you tell us you were seeing someone serious?" was Mom's initial reaction. Rewrite the text in a more casual tone. The research was more innovative, but Michelle made it personal. My Aunt Linda was really happy for us and told my parents. My phone was full of messages. "Why didn't you tell us you were seeing someone serious?" Mom's reaction was more like, "Congratulations. Ava may have compared you to her friend's architect's spouse." The guilt-tripping then began. "We should have been the first to know. We're your parents." It didn't matter that they hadn't inquired about my life once in the 3 months since the David incident. They were too preoccupied with helping Ava. "Well, Ava compared you to her friend's architect husband," and then the guilt-tripping began. "We should have been the first to know. We're your parents after all." It didn't matter that they hadn't inquired about my life once in the 3 months since the David incident. They were too preoccupied with helping Eva cope with the anxiety of possibly being discovered and having another affair. Then Mom called in tears, claiming that I was denying Eva her position as maid of honor and family tradition. When I reminded her that Ava wasn't even invited, she fell silent for a full minute before giving a speech about forgiveness and family ties. That's when the real drama kicked off. Richard's been acting distant ever since David, my ex-fiancé, started working as a personal trainer at his company's fitness center. Yep, you read that right. David quit academia to become a personal trainer. Seems he and Eva have been hooking up at the gym. Richard. Well, that's when the drama kicked off. Richard's been pretty distant ever since David, my ex-fiancé, started working as a personal trainer at his company's gym. Yep, you heard right, David quit academia to become a personal trainer. Turns out he and Eva have been hanging out at the gym. Richard doesn't know about it yet, but people are talking about it. Eva's been phoning me every day and leaving messages about how she needs her big sis. Meanwhile, my research has been doing really well. Last week, we got more funding for our study on cellular regeneration, And the grant committee specifically mentioned the creative lab design Michael and I made together as a contributing reason. Grandma Martha was over the moon when I gave her the news. "That's my girl," she said, proud as punch. His mom, a retired judge who really gets the complexities of the situation, said me. Something that really spoke to me was that family isn't about sharing DNA, it's about sharing respect. Michael's family has been incredible throughout this entire ordeal. One of my best friends is his sister, who's a professor of literature. Michael and I had our first real date in the botanical gardens, where he asked me to discuss the greenhouse specifications for the new research facility. We ended up talking for hours about everything from architectural history to photosynthesis, which is why the wedding planning has been surprisingly calm, mainly because we are keeping it small and meaningful. Grandma Martha, who has been more of a parent figure to me than my own parents ever were, is the only member of my immediate family who'll be there when Michael and I meet with her tomorrow to show her our wedding plans. To be honest, it seems perfect. Michael joins me for some sessions, and his insights as an architect often provide interesting perspectives. He said in our most recent session that emotional boundaries are like load-bearing walls. They're not about keeping people out, they're about maintaining structural integrity. I've started going to a therapist to process all of this, and she's helping me understand that it's okay to set boundaries even with family. Right now, I'm focusing on my research, my future spouse, and finally putting myself first. I'll give you another update once we have a clear wedding date. For the first time in my life, I feel appreciated and seen for who I am, not because I'm someone's sister or daughter. Second update. 2 more months have passed since my last update, and I wish I could report that things have improved with my family. The wedding is in 3 weeks, and instead of being a happy period of preparation, my parents and Eva have caused yet another family crisis. We meticulously organized everything. A small ceremony in the botanical gardens followed. I made it clear to my parents that Eva wasn't invited to the wedding, and that the guests were chosen to include my grandmother Martha, a few close relatives who've always been there for me, my colleagues, and Michael's family. My Aunt Linda called to warn me after overhearing Eva boasting about the surprise she was planning for the wedding, and it turned out that she'd already bought a dress that, in her own words, would show everyone what a real star looks like. I learned yesterday that my parents had not only informed Eva about the wedding details, but had actively encouraged her to attend. When I confronted my parents about it, they said they'd only mentioned it because they thought it would be nice for Eva to be there. They acted like they were helping me, but they really weren't. "We couldn't let you make the mistake of excluding your only sister. Mom said she's got a beautiful speech about sisterly forgiveness that would make the wedding so much more meaningful." This was the most frustrating part. They responded, "But she's going through such a..." They acted like they were helping, but they really weren't. "We couldn't let you make the mistake of excluding your only sister. Mom said she's got a beautiful speech about sisterly forgiveness that will make the wedding so much more meaningful." This was the most frustrating part. They responded, "But she's going through such a difficult time with Richard. He's been so cold to her lately, and she needs her family's support." I had to reiterate that someone who had an affair with my ex-fiancé is not allowed to speak about forgiveness at my wedding. With his exact words, "The only dramatic performance happening at our wedding will be our vows." Michael, who has been tremendously supportive throughout this whole ordeal, quickly phoned our wedding venue to set up extra security after I informed him of Ava's planned intrusion. "I'm going through a bit of a rough time right now. My parents are trying to get me to see that keeping Eva out of this is going to cause some major problems. They're saying that the way she's been acting lately, it's like she's been ripping a hole in our family." I told them that the only drama at my wedding is going to be when my fiancé's ex-girlfriend shows up. I'm not going to be able to talk about forgiveness. Michael's been super supportive through all this, and he's just called the wedding venue to sort out extra security. I told him about the plan Ava's got to disrupt my wedding, and he's like, "Yeah, it's a bit ironic, isn't it? I mean, I'm starting a new life with Michael, and Ava's marriage to Richard is falling apart at the same time." Richard started asking about all the time she's been to the gym with David, and my Aunt Linda says they've been having some pretty heated arguments at their place. But my parents are making it seem like it's her who needs help, not the person behind the whole situation. And on top of that, my colleague saw David and Eva having lunch at the gym, So me and my mom were at this cafe near the university and we looked pretty cozy, you know? I mentioned it to her, hoping she'd spot the pattern. But she just said it's because Eva's a supportive friend to someone going through a career change. But this week my parents tried a new approach. Dad, who never used to drop by my lab without warning during my academic career, tried to convince me that keeping Eva out would cause a rift that can never be healed. The rift was created when you consistently... We were at a cafe near the university, getting on really well, and I decided to mention it to my mother, hoping she'd spot the pattern. But she just dismissed it, saying Eva was just a supportive friend to someone going through a career change. So my parents tried a new strategy this week. Dad, who never used to show up at my lab without warning in my academic career, tried to convince me that keeping Eva out would create a rift that can never be healed. The rift was created when you consistently chose her over me, and it was widened when you dismissed her betrayal of my trust. I said, looking at him standing there, "This man who's never taken an interest in my work, don't worry about Eva." Grandma Martha, bless her, assured me I'd be stationed at the entrance, and that she wouldn't dare try to get past me. Grandma Martha, who's 92 years old and still sharp as a tack and doesn't take foolish people well, offered to run interference on the wedding day. My research lab has become my haven during all of this chaos. The clarity of the data analysis and the precision of the scientific work are a welcome change from the emotional manipulation I'm dealing with at home. Michael's brother, who works in private security, has also arranged for a few colleagues to be present disguised as guests. I've hired extra security for the wedding, though it pains me that I have to protect my own wedding from my sister's intrusion. The venue has been given photos of Eva and strict instructions not to allow her entry for 3 weeks. The clarity of the data analysis and the precision of the scientific work are a welcome contrast to the emotional manipulation I'm dealing with at home. Michael's brother, who works in private security, has also arranged for a few colleagues to be present, disguised as guests. I've hired additional security for the wedding, though it pains me that I have to protect my own wedding from my sister's intrusion. The venue has been given photos of Eva and strict instructions not to allow her entry 3 weeks before the wedding. I should be thrilled about marrying the amazing man who supports my career, knows my boundaries and loves me for who I am, but instead I'm planning how to prevent my own sister from ruining my wedding day. My graduate students have noticed my increased presence in the lab, but they've been incredibly supportive. I will provide another update following the wedding. Regardless of Eva's presence, I am getting married to Michelle. I will no longer allow my family's drama to overshadow my... Before the wedding, I should be thrilled about marrying the amazing man who supports my career, knows my boundaries and loves me for who I am. But instead, I'm planning how to prevent my own sister from ruining my wedding day. My graduate students have noticed my increased presence in the lab, but they've been incredibly supportive. I'll provide another update following the wedding. Regardless of Eva's presence, I am getting married to Michelle. I won't let my family's drama overshadow my happiness. Third, yesterday was the wedding, and while I wish I could say everything went well, my family did manage to pull off one last dramatic moment. But this time something unexpected happened. The truth was revealed and the fallout was both painful and freeing. Eva, as usual, wore a white dress that looked more appropriate for a red carpet event than a morning garden wedding, and our parents showed up at the botanical gardens. Despite all our precautions, my mother sobbed uncontrollably about how happiness. Yesterday was the wedding, and while I wish I could say everything went well, my family did manage to pull off one last dramatic moment. But this time something unexpected happened. The truth was revealed and the fallout was both painful and freeing. Eva, as usual, wore a white dress that looked more appropriate for a red carpet event than a morning garden wedding, and our parents showed up at the botanical gardens. Despite all our precautions, my mother sobbed uncontrollably about how cruel it was to exclude them. While my father tried to reason with the security team, Grandma Martha and Michael's sister came. I was in the bridal suite with him, and as I saw the chaos at the door through the window, something inside of me finally broke. It all came to a head when I stepped out to the entrance, still wearing my wedding dress. After years of being the nice daughter, being silent as they denigrated me, and watched them justify Ava's actions. Emily, how could you do this to me? I'm your sister. I'm here to support you and show you how much I love you, Eva said as she launched into her performance. When she saw Richard's car arrive in the car park, she stopped talking. Yes, it was Richard, her husband, who had reportedly followed her there. A scene from a movie played out when Richard confronted Ava about her relationship with David, despite her best efforts to deny it. David called her phone, which was on speaker, and everyone heard him ask whether she would still be coming over. Eva told me, I came here to support you and show you how much I love you. When she saw Richard's car arrive in the car park, she stopped talking. Yes, it was Richard, her husband, who had reportedly followed her there. A scene from a movie played out when Richard confronted Ava about her relationship with David, despite her best efforts to deny it. David called her phone, which was on speaker, and everyone heard him ask whether she would still be coming over. Later, my mother turned to me and exclaimed, Look what you've done! If you had just invited your sister properly, none of this would have happened. Rather than confronting Eva about her actions, the last straw was that I answered in a surprisingly composed voice. No, Mom. These are her decisions, not mine. She chose to have an affair with my fiancé while she was married, to attend my wedding without being invited in white, and to keep seeing David behind Richard's back. 3 years ago I found my then fiancé David and Eva together in his office. I started to turn to our guests when I told our parents they never asked how I was feeling. They were only concerned with protecting Ava's marriage because Richard has a prenuptial agreement. Richard's expression changed from hurt to angry. A prenup, is that why you've been pretending everything's fine? He asked Eva, who revealed everything through mascara and tears. The affair with David had been going on before he and I were engaged, and she had pursued. She was bored and couldn't stand it for 1 minute. I had something she didn't. My parents, who were still more worried about Ava's failing marriage than their other daughter's wedding day, followed. Richard turned and left without saying another word, and Ava ran after him while yelling his name. Following their departure, an extraordinary event occurred. The remaining guests, which included my colleagues, Michael's family, Grandma Martha, and the relatives who had consistently, she got bored of him and couldn't stand the sight of him anymore. My parents, who were still more worried about Ava's failing marriage than their other daughter's wedding day, followed. Richard turned and left without saying another word, and Ava ran after him while yelling his name. Then something really weird happened. The rest of the guests, which included my colleagues, Michael's family, Grandma Martha, and the relatives who had always supported Ava, surrounded us in a protective circle. Michael's mother, a retired judge, then asked, Now shall we have a wedding? Michael's vows moved me to tears. He pledged to love me and to always see me, to value my mind as much as my heart, and to create a life based on mutual respect and understanding. The ceremony was lovely, with the gardens in full bloom and the morning sun casting a natural spotlight through the trees. My Aunt Linda told me today that Richard is divorcing Ava. The prenup means she won't get a penny. My parents are devastated and trying to work out how to support her. But for the first time ever, I don't feel like getting involved in the drama. Michael and I are going to some of the world's most cutting-edge research facilities on our 2-week honeymoon in New Zealand, which is the perfect mix of science and leisure. Just like us, some of the most significant experiments are the ones that, you know how things always seem to go wrong, but you end up discovering something revolutionary? That's exactly what happened when Grandma Martha called to see how I was doing this morning. As always, she's spot on. Amidst all of that craziness, I found my own strength. I'm not sure what the future holds for my family, but I'm focusing on my new life with Michael, my research, and the family we've chosen. We've chosen this family based on genuine love and respect for one another, rather than duty and rivalry. I have a feeling my parents will eventually give me a shout if you can help Ava get back on her feet. It's time for my honeymoon with my amazing spouse, who loves me for who I am, not what I do. This will be my last update. Cheers to fresh starts, clear boundaries, and at last the freedom to be myself. Thanks for watching. If you're not subscribed yet, Please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories.